are here for the first time, and welcome back to those who have been here before. Tonight, the talk is by Dr. Lai Chi Kian, and he'll be talking on the topic of the life and architecture of Ivor Shipley in Malaya. I won't be introducing him because there's a person who's better in that capacity than I am. So let me call upon Mr. Clement Liang, uh, head of Penang Heritage Trust, in order to do the honors of introducing and giving a slight bio and background to Dr. Lai.
Thank you, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this evening or talk on. We seldom do architecture, so I think it's good we kickstart this series of talk. Of course, this evening we're very honored to have Dr. Lai Chi Kian. He flew all the way from Singapore, and tomorrow he's going back. So actually, we met up, I think 2 months ago, with Mr. May, and then also the Bob Kim. They was like, in fact, what happened is that I wanted to do some exhibition on this German Bauhaus thing. It's like I'm not the architect, so I better ask this architect. He say, right, and then he say, Dr. Lai is an authority in that. So this is how I got to know him and realize he's really a master in this architecture. But I would like to introduce further. Dr. Lai is a Singapore-based lecturer and registered architect whose research focuses on the history of art, architecture, settlements, urbanism, and landscapes in Southeast Asia. He holds a Master of Architecture by Research from the National University of Singapore and then a PhD in History and Architecture and Urban Design from the University of California in Berkeley. Well, he served now as the Vice President of the Society of Architectural and Urban Histories of Asia and sits on the Advisory Committee of the International Association for the Study of Traditional Environments. A long title, but it's impressive, I would say that. Well, he has a lot of published works. I saw he's holding a very thick book. Wow, I was so impressed. Well, I'll just name a few. His published works include Building Merdeka, Independence, Architecture in Kuala Lumpur. And today, okay, we'll talk that a bit on that. I think a lot of that. In fact, I was amazed when we were all young. Wow, such impressive, our national, this Parliament House in Kuala Lumpur is a symbol of independence. Stood in the in the hill up in Kuala Lumpur. So who were the one behind? We always thought should be some local, but we learned a lot later that actually is somebody else, and that architect actually also spent quite a lot of time in Penang. Yeah, this Ivor Shipley. Yeah, okay. So I think without further ado, I'd like to invite our Dr. Lai and to share with us his story. So much of things. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Lai.
Thank you, Clement. Thanks to Penang Institute, as well as the co-organizers, Penang Heritage Trust, as well as the PAM Northern Chapter. Thank you so much for spending this evening here at Penang Institute. I cannot claim to be an expert, but what I have been doing 20 over years ago was to look at the architecture of independence in, at the time, Malaya, right, 57, and then subsequently Malaysia in 1963. So this would be a kind of intersecting a lot of the histories, but also the lives of architects like Ivor Shipley, who I will talk about today. So the title of the talk, I will be using some of the interviews that excerpts of the interviews that I had with Ivor, as well as to try to contextualize it within the history of architectural development in general, but also intersecting his life not only in Penang, but also subsequently when he moved to Kuala Lumpur, right, to continue with his work at the then Public Works Department. Of course, now it's called JKR. So without further ado, let me try and see if it works. Okay, so this is Ivor's CV, so to speak. He was born in UK. Right? He joined the army to serve, right? And he went to Singapore working as with the engineers as part of his national service. So he's already had an experience of this part of the world, right, in 1951. So he then went back, and by that time he had already studied at the AA. Right? He started at another university, but then he graduated from the Architects Association in London. Right? There seems to be some noise coming from. I'm very sensitive to sound, so please. Yeah, and so he was fascinated by this part of the world. He applied through the Colonial Service to come to this part of the world again, and he actually applied to Singapore. But when his ship sailed and docked at Penang, they told him, "This is your stop." Right? So although he applied for Singapore, he eventually landed up in Penang. Right? So fortunately for Penang, and fortunately for Malaysia, I think we have him as a sort of an architect that came here. So you can see in his CV, I'll just quickly introduce that from 53 to 56, he was based in Penang as the state architect. So the Public Works Department has a system of distributing one architect in one state. Right? So there would be an architect in Kedah. I think there was another one in Pahang, and so on and so forth. So he took over and became the state architect of Penang, 53 to 56. Then subsequently, he took a break, right? So after 3 years, they're allowed to get a sort of a holiday. He went back, and then when he returned to Malaya, he was then posted to Kuala Lumpur on account that he was quite a good designer, and we'll see why, I think, in the next slide, where he stayed on until about 1964. Right? So then subsequently, he went to join Maxwell Fry and Partners, Fry Drew and Partners. Sorry, Fry Drew and Partners. We'll talk about Maxwell Fry a bit later. And then subsequently, he applied back then he became the state architect for Sabah. Right? And then after a few years, then he went to join a kind of a regional practice called International Project Consultants, where he did various projects in Sabah, in Brunei, and then eventually he sort of migrated to Australia and Perth, which was where I met him for the interviews in 2001. So it's 24 years ago. So I beg your indulgence because I'm getting old, so some memories could be a bit, leaky, so to speak. Okay. Then, of course, he did a few projects as a private architect in Perth until he passed away in 2008. Right. So these are some of his drawings when he was studying, and at that point in time. Right. So some of the sketches are actually done after he became an architect. The one on top is kind of historical building studies survey, right, of different things. And then of course he won. He was made MBE, right? And also in 1960, right? So it's even before he started designing the Parliament House, right? He was already knighted, right? So it's Sir Ivor Shipley. And in 1964, he was made the Dato', right? And these are the sort of medals that he proudly showed me when I visited him in Perth. So let's talk about Pulau Pinang, 1953 to 1956. So this is from the interview transcript. So what happened was that once he got off the boat in Penang, he was put to sort of maintain buildings. So it was just actually, this was the period after World War II. So there was a lot of damage. There were some old buildings, right, from the old colonial era. So his task was to maintain them. And in fact, the 6 months of maintaining buildings, and I think this is quite important for architects, actually taught him about how buildings would react and perform in our tropical climate. And also, what kind of ways might work and what might not work. So this, he says in the interview, is that, it teaches them a lot. And you can see I've marked out in red that a lot of things that he learned, right? And of course, we are still learning today. Modern architecture and the teachings of Corbusier actually doesn't get you very far when you come to this part of the world, right? It doesn't help you to work with the problems. Not that Corbusier's problems are not problematic already. So, so let's look at the work. So there's a body of work that he did here. I don't think it's exhaustive, but these have been published. And I will start with this. This Georgetown Secondary School was supposed to be a new kind of secondary school with offering different kinds of courses. So in fact, the report claims that it is the first of its kind in Malaya, right? It's not just in Penang, but in the whole country, right? So he was tasked to work. So you can see that his work, right? There's a lot of public work, right? Institutional work, right? So schools, right? And subsequently Parliament House fall under that category of institutional buildings. So by 1955, there were the labs and all that. So it's a kind of very, at that time, right, a very complex school plan. And it was eventually completed and opened, completed in 1956 and opened in 1957. So these are some images from the opening ceremony publication that the school put out, including some of these construction photographs, right? These are the construction. So you can already see a kind of signature of Ivor's work is that, it's unmistakably modern, right? So it's a kind of linear block, right? The elements are very clear. This is quite a lot of times elevated on stilts and so on and so forth. Right? So it's a kind of modernist language. Some more images, right, closer to completion. Right? Of course, it looks pristine, right, because it was just brand new at the time. So these are some of the photographs I took when I visited in 2002, right? So I think the school, I wasn't able to visit this time. I believe it's still there. Then, of course, the other school that actually also showcased his design flair is the Penang Island Girls' School. Right? So this, again, you have classroom blocks, but one of the sort of very distinctive features, I think some of you have studied there, is the sort of a circular plan canteen right in the middle, which sort of becomes a kind of focus as well. So this building has an afterlife, right, which I will talk about much later. So some photographs, right, when it was being highlighted for publication, so you already can see the circular canteen, right? So this is the canteen seen from different parts of the school. Okay, then the next project that I can talk about is actually published in PETA, right? So the Architects magazine. This is the Penang Council Chamber, right? So so you can see this is already the start of his sort of a series of designs involving governance, right? So either at the state level and then subsequently with the Parliament House at the kind of national level, assembly, right? So you can see the old. So in fact, if you compare the two plans, he actually solved it in a very clever way, because there are one or two sort of rooms, right? By skewing certain walls, right? There would be places where you can allow for reporters or people coming to witness the sort of a council meeting. Right? So this was in 1957. So in fact, in terms of these kinds of assembly spaces, right, they would eventually culminate in the Parliament House. Right? This would be a very early one. Am I speaking too fast? It's okay, right? Okay, thank you. Then this is one of my favorite projects, and I've actually named the talk from Balik Pulau to Jalan Parlimen, mainly because I believe, if memory serves me right, that this could actually be seen as a kind of genesis of the design of the Parliament House. Right? So a lot of ideas were sort of seem to have come from designing this building at Balik Pulau. So this is located at a very prominent location. So at Balik Pulau, there's a small roundabout, right? So it's actually just behind that. So you can see that actually he sort of places the sort of different buildings, right, incorporating a kind of vehicular parking area, right? Because they had sort of to move about, right? So the vehicles are on the left-hand side of the drawing, and then you had several linear blocks that addresses that roundabout area, right? So it's not at an angle. So this is when it was completed. I wish it looked like it is today, but unfortunately, I think there were a lot of. So perhaps if we are to conserve buildings, modernist buildings in Penang, it is my wish that we could restore it back to what it looked like back then. Okay, but that's just a wish. Then he was involved with the Bayan Lepas Airport extension. So the part that has a dotted red kind of square is the very first of a building, and he was tasked to sort of extend the airport, but in fact, knowing that subsequently they would actually build a completely new airport, but this would be serving Penang, right? In the meantime, right? So he designed some lounges, right, and some sort of travel accommodations in a sort of very interesting kind of plan, right? So some views of the new structures, right? So including dealing with international mail and so on and so forth. This is a building that I think I guess, right, that Shipley had designed. This is the quarters for the Balai Bomba, right, the fire station, and it is placed just behind the central fire station, right? And you can see actually it's a very interesting thing, and the columns, right, or what we call the pilotis on the ground level, is not straight, right? Sort of tilted at an angle, but by the simple action of the tilt, it's actually suggesting that the tilt is supporting the main bulk of the building, right? And the corridor that extended out is actually just something that is kind of another structure that is fixed onto that linear block. So it actually sort of tells us, what to look for, right, in the main part, or something that is ancillary, right, which is the sort of walkway. Then the other signature thing that you could see here is that he would place two staircases, one on each end of the long linear block. Right, so these are the sort of staircases. These photographs were taken some time ago, I think yesterday or the day before I went, and it's now painted in white and red, I think, maybe to connect with the fire engines team. Okay, so these are some of the projects that Ivor did. I hope that in time, maybe, right. I've not been looking at this for a while, but hopefully we can bring to bear some more of his projects that he did over the, although it's a short period of 3 years, right, it seems that there had been quite a lot of work done. Okay, there was a very interesting kind of encounter sometime in the 1950s. So let me, okay. So what happened was that Ivor was looking for a method of sort of modularizing, right? So making standard elements within the building and then sort of connecting them together. And Konrad Volksmann, who escaped from Germany, right? He was a Jew, and then formed the General Panel Company with Walter Gropius in the U.S. So it was in the U.S. at that time when he was invited to conduct a series of seminars in Japan, right, to a group of young Japanese architects who eventually we will know as the metabolist architects. So he was already known to be quite famous, right? And his work dealt with prefabricated components that could come together, right? So on the top right, you see kind of the paneling system where you had prefabricated components all coming together to form a house, right? So it actually so if everything was prefabricated, then you only needed to order the components that you need, and then create the spaces that you have as an entity of a house. So on his way to Japan, Volksmann stopped over in Penang and he met with Ivor Shipley, where they had a very good discussion because Ivor was also looking out for a way to so-called mass-produce buildings, right? And modularization would seem to be a very useful solution, right, for putting them together. So this led to the use of a grid system based on 40 inches, right? So 40 inches was used because at that point in time, although the countries were going metric, a lot of building components were still in imperial sort of measurements, right? So you had to use inches and feet. So 40 inches was a good dimension, right? Because it approximates 1 meter, right? And then you would have sub-components of the 40 inches, right? So you could then use 20 inches, or you could then use 5 inches, 2.5 inches, or a combination of these measurements, right? So that you could actually design things that could somehow fit together, right? Because they are sort of modular. So this actually eventually was something that I actually used quite a lot. So just a bit about Konrad Volksmann. Konrad Volksmann, when he was in Germany, he designed the house for Albert Einstein. So which you see Albert Einstein in his house on the left-hand side, right? And then in 1955, right? So in 1955, he was Volksmann was invited. So these are some, on the right are some cartoons from the Shin Kenchiku magazine from Japan, and sort of highlighting who were present at the seminar, right? Eventually, they would become notable architects of their own right, right? So if you look at some of the metabolist work, like the Nakagin capsule building and so on and so forth, right? Some of these ideas could have been discussed with Konrad Volksmann, right? So this is some of his work. So you can see he was on the top left is the project that sort of really captured everybody's imagination, because it was a kind of structure that you combine components together to create an airport hangar, right? So you could create unhindered space below for the airplanes, right? Working on a system of joints, right? And sort of standardized members. At the bottom, left, you see him with his business partner, Walter Gropius, for that general panel system company. On the bottom right is, in his meeting with some of the sort of architects of that time, right? And also this musician called John Cage. Okay, so just by way of introduction, right? So meeting with Conrad Voxman and then the body of work that was done in Penang after his sort of leave, right? 3 months leave, he would return to Malaya, but would then serve at the HQ of Public Works Department, right? JKR, and he would be there from 1956 to 1964, right? Overseeing the completion of the Parliament House. Okay, so the time that Shipley returned, right, to Malaya was a time when Malaya was of course embroiled in the emergency, which would then conclude in 1960. Right? But that was the time that he returned. So there were a lot of disturbances, and there was sort of fear, generally fear all around. And because of a certain assassination, whose famous road in Penang is named after, I shall not say who. There was a replacement, right? So the British felt that they needed a certain sort of military kind of type of leader in Malaya, and so sent Gerald Templer along with Donald McGillivray. I always have problems with that name. And Templer came, and as part of his different sort of campaigns, he proposed that to capture hearts and minds of the people, which was what the main campaign was a kind of short form for. He proposed that there should be some sort of Malayan architecture that would also be something that would be sort of a kind of national kind of capturing people's attention, right? And that would also help build nationalism amongst the citizens. So to that end, some of the architects actually were sort of already discussing it. They started a series of articles exploring what is Malayan architecture, right? So what are the sort of different things that could become adopted as Malayan architecture? The cartoon on the bottom right actually suggests what people thought otherwise, right? Because there was a housing shortage and all that, right? So we couldn't even live in houses, and now you're talking about Malayan architecture. But this is also where the second kind of a German person that Ivor Shipley met, right? Because at this point in time, he arrived in Kuala Lumpur, but there was also another person who arrived almost around the same time, and eventually they became next door neighbors, right? So this guy was Julius Posner, who arrived in Kuala Lumpur to take over the KL Technical College, right, which had a sort of training of the future architects. KL Technical College actually started quite a long time ago, training technicians, right, PW technicians, but eventually it was sort of changed into a training school for architects. So Julius Posner also participated in this debate about Malayan architecture, right? What it was, right? There was subsequently a sort of round table amongst architects to discuss, right, what was Malayan architecture, of which Julius Posner was a part of, right? But of course, this so a lot of the discussions, that were published in PETA, right, the magazine that the Institute of Architects at the time, right, so FMSA, which I will talk about later, so sort of carried a lot of the debate, but the debate was also not without opposition, right? And one of the key things that need to be said was that at that point in time, Datuk Sri Lim Chong Kiat was also returning and had a kind of different perception of what the mainly Western architects were propounding as Malayan architecture that seemed to have relied mainly on sort of Western models of architecture, and in some cases also orientalizing the vernacular architecture of Malaya, right? So this debate is important, and hopefully, right, we can write about this someday, right? But today I'll just talk about this because Julius Posner was also somebody who was in conversation with Ivor Shipley, being his next door neighbor. Okay, so then of course from the even while the emergency was going on, right, the Merdeka talks eventually led to the announcement of Merdeka first in Malacca, right? So there's a monument there that still commemorates where Tunku sort of proposed, right, that in a year's time, in August, that there would be a independence celebrations, right? So on the right, you see that taking place in the Stadium Merdeka, which was also built, right, for this purpose. So what my project was at the time, right, in the year 2000 to 2005, was to try to write about these 10 of these buildings, right? They're not at all exhaustive, but I felt that these 10 were important buildings that were a result of the sort of independence, right, sort of movement, so to speak. And one of the sort of first things that were architects committed to, right, Tunku Abdul Rahman committed to, was to build a Stadium Merdeka, right? So it's really interesting because if you remember, a lot of the sort of ceremonial parades, right, and sort of events were held at the Colonial Padang, right, at Kuala Lumpur. So, and it was a sort of a static green space, green lawn, and somehow, right, the green lawn of the Merdeka Stadium then sort of replaced another sort of static green lawn. And hosting, and it has to be said that the hosting of Merdeka ceremonies in a stadium, Malaya was one of the earliest, right? Subsequently, other African countries who also became independent also subsequently held their independence in the stadiums. And one of the things that I did not record at the time was the effort of Stan Jukes, right? Datuk Stan Jukes, who was the director of the Public Works Department at the time. So he was actually coordinating, which architects would be working on what buildings. And in fact, he had planned out a path, so-called road to Merdeka. So physically manifesting or representing the road to Merdeka through this road that I talked about, right? Jalan, Parlimen, right? So if you look at the screen, reading from right to left, right? So from the right, you can see, once again, the Padang, right? So the Dataran Merdeka, right? So he says that the path, right, is symbolic, right? So it starts from Dataran Merdeka, which is kind of colonial space, right? Then you would then move on to Jalan Parlimen, and then there would be a site reserved for Masjid Negara. Okay, so the national mosque that would symbolize the sort of the people. Right? So in his words, the people of Malaya, right? But conceptualized through a mosque. And then if you move onwards on Jalan Parlimen, you will pass by the Tugu Negara, right? The national monument, to suggest that the country has gone through this period of hardship that we call emergency today. And then finally, as you continue to travel on this road, you will end up at the Parliament House, right? To suggest that the country is finally sort of liberated and free. So this path was actually in the end it did not happen in the way that he had thought of it, because suddenly Tunku Abdul Rahman said, no, we will not have the mosque where it is suggested, but instead he moved it down to its present location. Right, so the mosque was next to the old railway station. Right, on account that people from all over Malaya would actually travel to the capital city, and if they did not have any accommodations, they could spend the night at the mosque, right, before moving on elsewhere in the capital city. So there was a kind of a tussle, right, between Stanley Jukes and Tunku Abdul Rahman. And there's a story that, in fact, Stanley Jukes actually, while Tunku was away, held a meeting with other cabinet members, and actually other cabinet members agreed to having the mosque in the Jalan Parlimen location. But then when the Tunku returned from New Zealand, he was furious and said, no, I want the mosque next to the train station. So that's how it is today. But I think we need to sort of record, right? There was this attempt, right, to have a symbolic road, right, from colonial period to independence. Okay, so one of the other projects was the University of Malaya at Pantai Valley. So as you know, the University of Malaya actually started in Singapore, but Tunku Abdul Rahman said no, it should actually have a campus in Kuala Lumpur, and sort of Pantai Valley was located. And there was a tussle for the engineering department, right? So they needed to sort of set the engineering department up in Pantai Valley as a sort of, to divert it away from Singapore, right? So agriculture was also set up. And the third faculty that continued from the Raffles College days was the Faculty of Arts. So those people who were enrolled, right, in that period had to spend the first year in Kuala Lumpur and then subsequent years in Singapore and back and forth, right? So that was kind of interesting dynamics of that time. For the Faculty of Engineering, the sort of key lecturer, right, someone by the name of Charles Gray, suggested that you would have modular sort of components. But Stan Juk said no, right? He would, in the interest of time, he would take typologies of buildings that had already been built elsewhere, right, including Penang, and then to sort of use the same plans and then sort of compose, right, and a faculty out of those plans that already pre-existing plans. So this is where Penang Island Girls' School comes in. So if you go to, so the plan for the engineering classroom block is really the same plan as the Penang Island Girls' School today. Right? So you can see some of that. So that's how plans travel as well. Right? So from a school, right, to the Faculty of Engineering block. Okay. So I will come to the Parliament House later, but I wanted to also show you what Ivor Shipley was doing. I don't know how he has the spare time, but he was involved with the Federation of Malaya Society of Architects, or FMSA. So this is the kind of architects society, right, that would mainly host functions, right, and then conduct oversee the qualification exams of architects, right? So you can see Ivor was very much involved, right? He was not only a council member of FMSA, he was also in particular in charge of the exams, right? So the architects exams, and he was also in the publication committee, right? So that's actually how we actually have a lot of his work published in the magazines, right? The images that I've showed you today. On top of that, he was also a jury member of many of the sort of projects, including the Ipoh Turf Club, as well as, let me see here. Yeah, as well as the right? The new sort of some of the sort of blocks, right? So he was a jury member of those competitions. So if you remember, one of the things about Templars' idea of provision of housing and all that, FMSA and including Ivor Shipley was also in charge of this thing. Let me see, called the ideal homes, right? So they had a competition. The contractors donated a plot of land in Jalan Utara in KL. And there was a competition, and 3 architects won the competition, right? And there will be a raffle. There will be people, taking part in the raffle. Whoever won, it was just RM1. So the 3 lucky winners actually bought a house for RM1 raffle, right? And yeah, and you would live in architect's design house, right? But that was what was happening. So this was to encourage the design of private houses outside of the city. So just very quickly, the 3 winners were Dato Kington Lu, right? So this was the house that he designed. Eventually, he got. I actually wanted to buy one of the houses, but too expensive by the time. Then this one was by Fong Yin Leong, right? Another architect, and the last one was Norman Leahy, right? One by Norman Leahy, who was actually sort of really pioneering sort of modular timber houses as well at that time, right? So there was this accent on trying to create housing, right? So in fact, this is another talk on its own, but I'll just show you some slides here. Okay, but back to Ivor Shipley's work, and you can see the continuity from Penang, right? The designs that he did from Penang, the kind of exchanges that he had with Corin Boxman, because he started to design. He was tasked to design a standard office, right? So this was the time when the colonial government was transferring duties and everything to the local people, right? So a lot of office space was required. So that's the way that I can put it. So he was tasked to design something that was standard, something that as he says, even the secretaries could plan what the building could be like. So it would be what you see on the screen, right? So you can see that there's some familiarity with buildings in Penang. That you would have several bays, right? The ground level will be raised so that it could also accommodate the different terrains, right? Sometimes it'll be sloping, sometimes it'll be flat. And then you would have sun shading on both sides, right? One side would be a corridor, and the other side would be a kind of system of shading, right? Panels that were sort of designed, right? And then at the 2 ends would be the staircases that would lead up to it. Okay, so this, and eventually 200 of these were built, right? After they were sort of proposed. Then he also was involved with the transfer of Parliament, right? So this used to be the PW headquarters, but it was decanted out, right, and placed somewhere else. And the Tunku Abdul Rahman Hall was housed in the former PW quarters, and Ivor Shipley did the interiors, right? So I'll come to his involvement with interiors at the time. But so once again, you can see that with the council chambers in Penang, right? So he continued to sort of design these kinds of places where you had sort of political leaders meet. And it was also the location for the cafe sort of economic sort of conference at the time. I believe this is the picture from the time, right? Oops. Okay, so having sort of designed a sort of standard office block, and trying to sort of transfer the sort of governmental spaces into a new building, because at this point in time a Parliament House was required. So Stan Jukes had a hand in trying at his first hand at Stan Jukes is a really amazing character that would he will work late into the night, right? He will just clear his dinner table and then continue to draw and so on and so forth. So this was his first sort of attempt, right, at the at the design of a Parliament House. So if you notice at the bottom, there are a whole series of roads. So at that point, just below what is known as West Folly Hill, right, where the Parliament House would be, right, there was a name for it, was seven roads coming to a point. So he tried to solve it with a traffic circus, but then he would have an elevated driveway that would then lead to the Parliament House on top of the hill. Okay, so his design was very symbolic, right? He would take the I think it was 9-pointed star or 11-pointed star of Malaya, right? And then I think there would be a crescent kind of pond in front. Right? So it became very sort of a very symbolic for the Parliament House. Okay, and of course there was a debate at the time, right? They wanted to conduct a competition, but eventually he felt that they should just send one of their architects, right, and then entrust the job of designing a Parliament House to the local architect. And of course, because he had already shown such design sort of talent, Ivor Shipley was sort of said, you design the Parliament House. So for that, he embarked on a tour to look at examples of Parliament houses around the world, including Herbert Baker's Parliament building in Delhi, right? And also at that point in time, there was a lot of consideration of what kinds of spatial design, right, would that be? And eventually, the decision was to have an upper house and a lower house, right, which was supposedly the Westminster system. But it also came with a sort of an arrangement of two rows, right? One would be for the ruling party, and the other row opposite it would be for the opposition, right? So there would be a very clear demarcation of who was ruling and who were in the opposition. Okay, I'm now treading on some political ground, but you can see that even the layout suggested this kind of political priority. So if you have a sort of a U shape kind of thing, right, it suggested that you had sort of I think it's called the horseshoe or so. The French would be using it, but then the British would use the system where you had governing party and opposition. So that was the decision that, in fact, Ivor Shipley made. Right? It wasn't Tunku Abdul Rahman that eventually permitted this kind of system to work. And in fact, this is on the bottom right. There's a letter. I can't remember the name. Gerald Hawkins, a fellow architect, wrote to Shipley to say that he's very glad that he had chosen the sort of Westminster sort of system of arrangement. And Ivor Shipley actually had some proposed projects. Right? I'm not very sure if it had been built. I tried to look out for it in Ipoh, but I couldn't. But the Ipoh Secretariat building on the top, right, a proposal by Ivor Shipley, had placed a block, right, a tower block, and intersecting a podium block, right. So podium block are the sort of low stories, right, that constitute a form, and then you had the tower block, right, which you can raise to many levels. So on the top you can see his proposal. Right? This is a model for the Ipoh Secretariat building. And at the bottom row, right, these are the study models that his department, right, he would have people employed by him, and he would build. His team would build the models. And if you can see on the bottom left, that was the first proposal by Ivor Shipley's team, that to have a sort of more sort of linear block, right, expressed as a tower. But then behind that, there would be a kind of a lower podium block, right? So you can see he had been trying to sort of intersect, right? How do you connect the tower block to the podium block, right? The solution for Ipoh was to sort of cross it. The subsequent solution for the Parliament House, right, was to express it as sort of two blocks, right? And on the right, bottom right, you can see that that was the sort of model that was made for the eventual Parliament House. Okay, so these are some construction photos, right? So this is the roof of the lower house. It actually started out as if you cut it in a section, it was a pentagon. Right? There was 5 sides to this roof, but after doing the sort of structural calculations, they found that the turning point, right, closest to the ground, was too much. So eventually, it sort of became closer to a sort of triangular form, right? And so you can see the kind of very sophisticated form work and so on and so forth that was constructed in situ, right? So this is the tower that was in progress, right? It was being built. So this was an 18-story tower, right? It looks like this when it was in skeletal form, and then these are the sort of this is an image of the two the lower house and the tower block coming together. Okay, and to continue the sort of expression of tropicality, and so he would then have a corridor around the office building, and that would be covered by terrazzo panels. Right? So design terrazzo panels to sort of shield it, so like a kind of sunscreen. But the external corridor would also allow people to maintain the building, right, clean the buildings, and so on and so forth. So these were made in PJ, or one of the factories in PJ, and you can see that there were a lot of different types, and eventually then they were sort of brought together, and you can see even the expression at the corner is actually quite it's all sort of really worked out. Okay, so what you see here is not a photograph of the building, but a photograph of the model that was made to try to see how the terrazzo panels fitted together, and then there was a kind of an entrance, and then there's a kind of a pond, rectilinear kind of pond right next to it. Okay, so remember I was talking about how the tower block was connected with the podium block, and this was done by a bridge, a U-shaped bridge, right, starting from the podium, right, then encircling around the tower and coming back. And I like to tell this story because when this bridge, right, this bridge that goes around was completed, it was about 7 mm. The floor level of the bridge was about 7 mm higher than the tower block's floor. So Ivor Shipley then called up the engineer and said, how can you give me this 7 mm difference, right? And people might trip and fall. And the engineer told him, just wait for a week. And true enough, after a week, the bridge sort of settled down 7 mm, and the floor became flush between the tower block and the bridge. Okay, so you can see that the model actually sort of quite closely resembles what was eventually built, right, which is the main picture. Okay, and if you look at the photographs on the left, these were sort of furniture that was already designed by Ivor Shipley for the Penang Chamber. Right? So he was actually quite interested in also designing the interiors of buildings, and subsequently, of course, he was also involved with the design of the furniture in the Parliament House, and he's had a long-standing working relationship with a firm called Dietlem's. The history of Dietlem's is actually quite interesting and related to the rubber industry of Malaya, in that they had tried to also sort of build a coagulating tray, right, for rubber, because acid would be added to the rubber, right? So you needed to have either sort of aluminum and so on and so forth. And they found a way to combine aluminum with timber, right, for these kinds of trays. And so they said, after the war, around 40 something, they said, since we know how to do this, of course they make a lot of money just making the coagulation trays, but they said, why don't we just then transfer the expertise to furniture, right? So the furniture that is now that at that point in time was quite contemporary, right? Combining aluminum and timber came into being, right? And a lot of the furniture was, as you see here, a lot of structures that you see here were designed by Ivor Shipley and then sort of built by D terms. Okay, so some of the images here you can see on the bottom left. Ivor Shipley was so particular even to the curtains, right? He couldn't find the right curtains, so he went to Robinson's and bought this whole lot of curtains that you can see in the picture on the right. But what I wanted to try to show you here is the original photographs of the Parliament House with its sort of really nice sort of a modernist feel, combined with sort of local sort of timbers. Right, he would use timbers from different parts of Malaya, right, to do it. Okay, so these are some of the furniture that he designed for the Parliament House, but he also eventually also designed some for himself. The ones on the left, right, the two pieces of furniture on the left have been kindly donated by his son. His son actually sort of repaired the furniture, and they're happy to report that they're now, through the help of June, who is in the audience, we have been able to at least try to donate it to the new parliamentary gallery, right, that was supposed to be set up. Right? Whether it is, we don't know. So I think it's the right place for them. On the right hand side is another piece of furniture that I found in his house. Okay, so there's also another Penang related story with this mural, right? So Ivor Shipley actually wanted in the Parliament House to, that triangular space, to have a mural by an artist. So he remembered Mr. Chua Tian Ting in Penang, right, having all this batik work, and he I don't know whether he wrote to him or phoned him, and he contacted him and asked him to interpret, right, what the people of Malaya would be at the time. So Chua Tian Ting then painted 52 different, compared to the 5 representative Malaysians. Now you can see that we have 52 diverse sort of peoples, occupying that triangular mural, which Chua, when in another interview, suggested that this actually is the face of Malaya, right, of its citizens. Right, so you can see here is the detail. So this is the one that was supposed to be up, but he also had another mural, right, on the top right, and they are now still at Yahong Gallery in Batu Ferringhi, but it's within the office themselves. Okay. Then there is also another sculpture by Chong Lai Tong. So he commissioned and this other artist and sculptor Chong Lai Tong to create a sculpture for the sort of a pond area. And this sculpture, when I interviewed Lai Tong, he said that it was actually 2 figures, right? He didn't actually say what they were, but I suppose we can interpret it as the government and the people, right, which are represent the 2 figures moving off in the same direction. Okay, so this was what that thing was. And Lai Tong had another part in another part of history, which is the first set of coin designs for 1967, right? Because there was a competition held, and Hisham al-Bakri was one of the sort of judges, and the winning entry was a whole series of plants, animals of Malaya, right? So this was presented to Tunku Abdul Rahman, and he was apparently said, apa inilah, so, and said, no, we're not going to have this. So instead, why don't you use the Parliament House? But where do you find a drawing of a very nice drawing of the Parliament House? So Hisham al-Bakri then went and realized that the Rothmans cigarettes at the time had a very nice perspective drawing of the Parliament House, which was actually drawn by Chong Lai Tong. And so he took the cigarette box image, and then the rest is the story that we have all these coins, and with the image of the Parliament House. Okay, so after Kuala Lumpur, very quickly, he was working on other projects, right? He went back to work with Maxwell Fry. This is a letter written by Jane Drew to Ivor, right, after Maxwell Fry passed away. Right? So you can see they still kept in touch after he worked there. And this is a very interesting story I always tell in my class, and related to Ivor's training, about tropical architecture, which is that when Ivor was working at Maxwell Fry and Drew's office, the office was tasked to design the Legislative Assembly building for Mauritius. Yeah, for Mauritius, right? So Ivor, having designed quite a lot of parliamentary type buildings, was asked to come and comment on this, right? So what Maxwell Fry designed was this kind of structure, but with a glass roof, right? So of course he objected to that, and I want to read to you what my interview was, right? So, yeah, so he says, he saw the glass roof and he asked, what on earth, is that going to be in Mauritius? But you can't possibly build an assembly building with a glass roof. People will boil. You want to keep the sun out, not invite the sun in. You're absolutely right, Ivor. I've been out of the tropics too long. Okay, so this actually tells us that we can learn something, we can also unlearn something. Okay, and so eventually they had some kind of side lit windows, right? So eventually, he said, so he had, I said it was nonsense. He said, yes, you're right, right? Of course you're right, Ivor. Yes. So we didn't have a glass dome. I think it saved a lot of people from frying in Mauritius. Then I said, well, that was his last name, right? What? Maxwell Fry. Right? Maxwell Fry. Right? Yeah, exactly. Right? Fry with a Fry building. Okay, so this was a testimonial. Right? He eventually left the firm. He wanted to go back, and then he went back to work as a government architect in Sabah. And then after that, he worked in a private firm, IPC, and won this competition for the High Court building. Right? This was in Brunei. So if you go to Brunei, this is still there. It's a photo. That's the photograph I took in 2014, and on top is the photograph that he furnished. Okay. So I just want to end. I know we've gone past the time, but I just want to end with some pictures of his life. Meeting political figures like Tun Razak, and then of course the Sultan at the time, right? Ivor is in the middle. Then these are photographs of the Parliament House, and he with his colleagues. And then the bottom two are very interesting, right? Every time they finish one floor of the tower block, they would have a celebration. And they will be celebrating in the story that they have completed. Right? And then you'll have this party and so on and so forth. Right? This is when I met him, 2001 in Perth, and some of the photographs kindly sent to me by his son, Ralph Shipley. And then, yeah, so I just wanted to just end off with this anecdote about him, in the right place at the right time, and also feeling very responsible at the time. So this was also at the Parliament House where there was a typhoid scare, right? And I think it originated in Malacca or something. So it meant that everybody had to have shots, right? So inoculation, and of course everybody was afraid of needles. And then he then took the lead, right? He got him, his wife, his children, and went straight to the front of the line for inoculation. I think he subsequently said afterwards that I think his wife was pregnant at the time and he would have been placing her at risk, but that was the kind of responsibility that he felt that he had to lead by example. Right? I'll take my family, and we'll be all inoculated. So this was really sort of that the type of action that would personify Ivor, and you can see, right, he had to do everything, right? So every moment was precious. Right? Thank you very much.
the Q&A, and I'm sure some of you, I've seen a lot architects here tonight. So I think, yeah, I wonder why. Of course, our Dr. Lai has such a good, sharing knowledge with us. So I mean, a lot of things that we take for granted. The buildings we have, the Parliament House in KL still stands majestically. But thanks to those, those early days, those architects, whether with the British or, I mean, later we also have our locally trained architects. But what do you see in future, in trend, this Malaysia now, a lot of new buildings, getting lesser of these local elements? Yeah, I don't know. I look at sometimes even like Putrajaya, a lot of things they're not doing incorporate local elements, but more Arabic or what, there's things like that. So what do you think the trend towards? Are they built to specifically to our weather? Are they serve the purpose that we think they should be heading towards direction? What kind of architects we're going facing? A bit difficult. Okay, never mind. Yes. Up. Yes, okay.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I don't think I'm qualified to, and sometimes I think it's probably easier to be focused on this period of time, and also to remind ourselves that there was such a period, right? Kind of period that actually inspired quite a lot of modern architecture, and also perhaps the way of working. The task that I set myself was also to sort of really find out what are the sort of stories that are behind these buildings, right? Because we see them as objects, we see them as sort of political structures, but I think the architects at that time, right, had often been accused that they are agents of the state, right? So the state tells them, the politicians tell them, oh, you must design like this. But from one of the important things to be said about this era of architects, they included expatriate architects, they included local architects that were just returning from their studies, is that they took a lot of initiative. And to the extent that they sometimes would contradict Tunku Abdul Rahman. Right? So one of the examples is the Masjid Negara, right? That was designed by Dato' Baharuddin Qasim, because at the presentation stage where a model of the current National Mosque was presented to Tunku Abdul Rahman, Tunku Abdul Rahman said, "Where's the dome?" And then Tun Razak then said to Dato' Baharuddin, "Don't worry, just continue with your design." So you can see that if not for people who thought about these and coming up with new ways of thinking about that, we wouldn't have the type of architecture that actually we have for that Merdeka period. So I'm actually just trying to escape talking about the present, but it's really a different kind of time, and I don't. My kind of convenient excuse is that I have not really done enough work on that. Yeah.
No worries, because from the past we look into the future. Yeah. Anybody like to ask some questions or your opinion, sharing something? I think it's a very interesting topic. Talk about Malaysian architecture. We have our road. We are heading our own direction. Definitely, we look at the design of the new buildings, especially Malaysian has an own unique, also own brands. You arrive in Kuala Lumpur. Oh, this is Kuala Lumpur. This is Malaysia. It's different from Bangkok, Jakarta, or even Singapore. So it's definitely we see us molding our own identity. Yeah. But come back to Penang. Yes, sir. We have Komta. We have the new buildings that is coming up, and in the outskirts of Georgetown. And some I would say beautiful, some are damn ugly. Of course, it's my personal preference. And yes, yeah, like ask some question, Mr. Gray.
Just like curiosity. why from Balik Pulau to Jalan Parlimen? Why is Balik Pulau so special in this sense? I mean, anything unique of Balik Pulau which can be of touristic value? I just want to know lah. Then okay, for now, thank you.
Mr. Gui came from Balik Pulau.
Thank you for the question.
He's promoting his town.
Thank you for the question. I actually thought about this when I was trying to formulate it. As I mentioned in the talk, the Balik Pulau Police Station was an important project for Ivor Shipley. I think it would probably be the project that starting off in combining a lot of the ideas about the eventual Parliament House, and we can kind of draw some connections. The other suggestion is also that he was moving from Georgetown to Kuala Lumpur, right? So his architecture career in Malaya started in Penang, and then eventually to KL, and the most significant thing was actually the Parliament House. So it was actually the Balik Pulau Police Station to the Parliament House which was a kind of terminating point for Jalan Parlimen. So in that sense, I'm trying to sort of suggest that the Balik Pulau Police Station, the design elements and the sort of things that he thought about actually would also eventually end up in the design of the Parliament House itself. And also at the same time marking his move from Penang, represented by Balik Pulau, to Jalan Parlimen, which sort of represented Kuala Lumpur.
A journey of bigger achievement, I'll say that.
Something I forgot to mention is that his birthday was one day away from Tunku Abdul Rahman's birthday. So you can imagine that he was always called to Tunku's sort of celebration parties. 9 of February for Tunku, and I think 8 of February. Yes.
Yes.
I went to Island Girls School. That was my primary school. So I can still remember. And then there was a lot of colored glass, right? And then I also went to St. George's Girls School, which architecturally is quite similar. So I'm just wondering whether something like St. George's Girls School would have been designed by a contemporary architect, because I think it was also 1956 or so. Or would it have been designed, let's say, in the UK, and then the plans were sent out?
Ivor Shipley actually did say that the education department or ministry was very strict on the format of the classroom. So the sort of layout of the classrooms would have been very similar for the different schools. Even I'm not so sure about the St. George's Girls' School, and I only know more about the Georgetown Secondary School. So those, what I heard from his interviews is that they would be very specific about how the classroom blocks would be laid out. So I suppose the classroom blocks, right, the spatial feeling would be similar, but perhaps he would then, it would depend on how he would articulate the very specific elements like staircases, walkways, and things like that. Then at some point in time, then he could design a special element. So for the Penang Island Girls' School, it would be the circular, do you call it canteen or tuck shop? Or what was the feeling about having a circular plan tuck shop? Perhaps you can also share with us your experience.
It was very easy for the people who were selling food to manage, because they were right in the center, and then the counter, they could service like all the different food and drinks all around 360 degrees, and then all the chairs and tables will be outside that lah, but still under that main roof, circular roof. Yeah. So, but think of it, if it's such a good idea, why hasn't it been replicated?
Someone can suggest those.
It also whets the appetite, so we're eating a lot.
Actually, that is true. I can't help thinking about the design of hawker centers that I've been trying to look at also. Because if you lay out the hawker centers, you normally would have the stalls at the edge, because then the fumes would go out of the hawker center. But there's another building type, right? It's called Satay by the Base, actually designed by a friend, who also then went back to this concept of having the stalls, arranged in a circle. Then the fumes will just go straight up behind them, and you settle all the fumes, right, from the cooking fumes from that. And then the edge, could be nice seating, and then you can have plants and all that. So yeah, just ahead of his time, thinking about, you don't have to have a rectilinear tuck shop and things like that. But why it hasn't been reused is anybody's guess. Yeah. Maybe it's harder to design, to build a sort of circular structure at the time. I don't know. Is it that difficult? Maybe not.
The whole idea of like a reinforced concrete, a free form, right?
Yeah.
Which could be any form actually, but why is it always rectangle?
Yeah. But it also kind of became a kind of contrast to the rectilinear blocks, right? You have the rectilinear blocks that form a kind of U shape, then you had the tuck shop in the middle. Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Lai, for a very interesting talk. You mentioned at the beginning of your talk that he spent about 6 months maintaining buildings. So I would imagine that 6 months taught him to not to have any ornamentation in the buildings. So you can see that all his buildings are all, very plain and almost skeletal, which is perfectly sensible. And for public buildings, I guess that should be how it should be built, because if you can see even the present public buildings, they're becoming to get more ornamental, and the cost of maintaining all this unnecessary ornamentation is just unnecessary. So do you think that really influence his approach to design of public buildings?
Thank you for the observation and question. I think there are two parts. One is the training, maintaining buildings. I personally think it's a good idea, right? To maybe architects have to sort of maintain buildings, and then they realize how it works in the tropics, because I think the trend is to sort of think about look at other buildings and then see whether they can work here, and especially for modernist architecture that have flat roofs, and so on and so forth. As I quoted Ivor Shipley, right? So everything you know about Corbusier, when it comes to this part of the world, it doesn't work, right? If you have it from even Bauhaus, it may not work. So that, according to Ivor, that was a good 6 months that he actually learned that architecture has that there are different ways of the designing architecture, and climate plays a very important role in, if you understand how climate works, then how you design buildings would reduce the number of future problems that you would encrypt into the building itself. But we also need to think about that point in time where modernist architecture was coming in. So modernist architecture would also have would actually have very little ornament, and sometimes the structure would be the sort of where the so-called ornament is invested, and even a debate, right? So involve someone saying that ornament is a crime. So so that was the kind of ethos at the time that the modernist movement also sort of encouraged these kinds of very clean lines and so on and so forth. Then given that kind of palette, right, then how do you then sort of design something that would be interesting, right? would be still also function at the same time. So I think we spent some time talking about the tuck shop, but he also sort of slowly evolved this system of sun shading, corridors, and so on and so forth. And even, subsequently, what I've been trying to share with students, when I teach about architecture, is that in this part of the world, right, essentially, we cannot design a box. Right? In Western architecture and other parts of the world, you can design a box because they don't have the climate here. In equatorial climate, you need to design an outer box that covers the box inside, right? So you can see various manifestations of this, right? You look at the Malay house, you have raised floor, right? You have high ceiling. So you already have the two buffer zones on top and below. And then around the sides, you have a veranda or you have trees and you have so on and so forth. So in the design, very generally speaking, the design of this part of the world is that you have a box where you can be comfortable in, but you need to have space surrounding, right? Surrounding that comfortable space. So it seems to be as sort of as easy as that. But even my students, after they graduate and they go and design, they don't follow this sort of mantra of designing climate. So I think the two parts is that one, he could have benefited from the maintenance, 6 months of maintaining buildings, and I think it was also the time when clean lines in design, purported by the modernist movement, was also a factor in his, because although he talks about Corbusier as not being very useful, he sometimes refer to the designs of Corbusier as well. I hope that answers the question. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the online audience or yeah?
An online question from Thierry Lai. So the question is, the nation is chasing after contemporary architecture to match global cities. What should we do to raise interest in modernist architecture that is slowly disappearing from our cities?
Right. Thank you, Thierry. Thierry is from Balik Pulau, actually. But he's now based in Scotland. Thank you, Thierry. I think one important way is to perhaps still maintain the history of this period of architecture, because one of the reasons why we discussed to talk about Ivor is that a lot of the modernist architecture in Penang is also not, first of all, it's not sort of the history is not written, right? And a lot of the people who have passed through are also not recorded. So if you have this history of the buildings and the people from this period, right, post-war to about 1960s, before the new economic policy, then at least it is a base where other periods of architecture can be contrasted, right? So from the 60s architecture, how do you see the 70s? How do you see subsequent generations leading up to the Putrajaya, right? I once asked Jimmy Lim whether he had foolishly asked Jimmy Lim whether he had any buildings in Putrajaya, and his answer was, "Oh, I don't have a passport to work in Putrajaya." So that woke me up about a lot of the realities about what architecture had become, leading to Putrajaya. So hopefully it answers the Putrajaya part in some ways. Yes, Ching Ling.
Yeah, I think we'll take the last question before time out.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Lai. I think very interesting sharings. And we know that the 20th century heritage is the most difficult to conserve because the RC structures is more difficult to conserve compared to the masonry structure. So my question is that I will develop the complete specifications or standards for public work department. Then the second question is that did I were involved in the drafting of the building bylaw for Malaysia?
I
Thank you.
don't think he was involved. The short answer is that I don't think he was involved, because at that point in time, the key task of the architects is just to come up with the buildings that the state needs, the country needs, and so forth. So Ivor's main work, as far as I know, did not involve the drafting of specifications and so regulations and so on and so forth. But at that point in time, right, it was still mainly sort of just building buildings so that it can be used, because that's why a building such as the standard office block was created, because it would become like a standard that could be then transported to everywhere. So in that sense, right, he created a kind of a standard, but whether it is a kind of regulation, I don't think he did. But the standard office block then became a kind of model for standardization, right? The schools, when you build it, then it becomes a model for other people to look at. But from my knowledge, he was not involved with the setting of regulations, legislations, or specifications. I suppose he just built them, and then people could see what was useful and what was not useful. Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't really answer that question.
I'm sure also in compliance with the regulations and rules that require the time. So it's never heard him get fined for.
Yeah, as far as I know, the regulations only came up quite
1984.
1954. Okay, I have not researched that aspect.
Okay, I think our time is up. Yeah, 9:30, just exactly. Yep. So we also like to thank our Dr. Lai for sharing
Sure.
such a good insight into our own country's architecture.
Also Penang.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, ladies
you.
and gentlemen.
Thank you, Clement.
And
Thank you,
also
Penang
Dr.
Institute.
Lai. Yes.